This is Jonia Broderick. She's a dear friend of mine, and she is very passionate about writing history, and she's perfect for doing this presentation. Remind me to get you to handouts, and they'll be passing out some more as she starts here. Oh, you can read about her biography on the website.
Actually, make sure I get that put on the right way. I've been known to put it on backwards. The name of this class is Recording Your Once Upon a Time, and I cannot take credit for the title of this class. I am horrible at headlines. In all my years of writing, I could not write headlines. It was hilarious. My bosses would say, okay, great story. Now how about a headline? And I'd be like, and I'd give like, you know, in music how you reprise the last line of a song, and I like, how about the last line of the work? And they're like, doesn't make for a good headline. So, but my daughter came up with this, so I just want to give her credit where credit is due. I came up with the painless guide to writing your personal history. That was mine. I'm good at subheads, just not headlines. Introduction. Before we get into the meat of our program, yes. Oh, you need papers. There are so many handouts. Rob is going to be getting his 10,000 steps and then some. Before we get into the meat, let me tell you a little bit about myself and how I became a passionate history writer, personal history writer. When I was a little girl, so we have to go a few years back. When I was a little girl, my mom had a Jonia rule in the house. And this Jonia rule was written, or was made, because my mom was afraid I was going to become the biggest loser of all time. And I'm not kidding, she said that. No, it's true. I could read 2,000 words a minute. And I read everything under the sun. Well, everything light under the sun. And she said, for every fluff book you read, because she didn't want me to be a loser, I had to read a biography or a classic. And I read a lot of biographies and a lot of classics, because I read a lot of Nancy Drew and a lot of Little House on the Prairie, or similar books, Candy Striper or whatever. And so I came to love biographies. I also came to love the classics, but I came to love biographies. And I looked at biographies as a way to mold my character. I didn't have people to really mold my character. That's another long story in and of itself. But I looked at these biographies as how I was going to become. So I looked at, for example, Jenny Lind. And if you got your example of Jenny Lind from The Greatest Showman, throw that out. That's fake news. That was not Jenny Lind. I wanted to be Jenny Lind. And so I would sit under my tree with my cat, and I would sing to my cat or my puppy dog, and I would wait to be discovered like Jenny Lind was. I lived in Roland Heights, California. No one was going to discover me, and I didn't have the voice. But I tried. Or I would sit at my piano and play the piano and think I was the next Mendelssohn. And I had the sense of humor like Haydn, only I'd get in trouble and Haydn didn't. So I was going to be the next great musician. If I wasn't going to be Jenny Lind, I was going to be the next great musician. Except I didn't have that skill either. I was going to be gracious hostess, and gracious in every way like Martha Washington, or brilliant like Abigail Adams. Abigail Adams, I loved her so much, my first car was named after her. What can I say? Or I was going to be courageous like Jackie Robinson. And I was going to play sports. Jackie Robinson so inspired me. My first career choice was to be a sportscaster. Didn't last but my first semester in college that way. I loved biographies. When I got a little bit older, I discovered that I didn't have time to read that much, so I became a writer. And I discovered, oddly enough, that it wasn't politics that I wrote about. And I say oddly enough because I have been involved in politics since I was a little girl. And so I thought I would write about politics. But that's not where I won my awards. I mean, I'm in politics. I'm running for Congress. I'm a politico. But I didn't win awards for writing politics, about politics. I won awards for writing about people. And I like to write human interest stories. And I focus on human interest stories. My bosses, when I went into the public relations firms, would say, write about landscape architecture. And I'm like, I don't like landscape architecture, but I will write about the landscape architect. And I would win awards for my writing about the landscape architect. And I loved writing about the people. And as I got married and left that sort of workforce, I still encourage people to write their stories. I want you to write your story. And we had a ritual in our home, and it started in October, which was my husband's birthday, or January, which was, of course, the New Year. And then my husband, who was a really good writer, he was a corporate litigator, and he would take his computer, and he would sit at the table, and he'd say, I need to write my life history. I just feel prompted. He would start, this started when he was about 30. You know, at 30 you have so much of a life history to write. And he'd say, I need to write my life history. And he'd open the laptop and he'd start to type, and he'd delete, and he'd type, and he'd delete, and he'd type, and he'd delete. He was a great writer. I mean, he was known in big law as a great writer, and he was known in a smaller law firm the last 5 years of his life as the go-to writer. But he'd type, and he'd delete, and he'd type, and he'd delete, and after an hour he'd say, I have no clue where to start. He'd close the computer and put it away, and we wouldn't hear about it again for another year. And until 2 weeks ago, I thought I had nothing of his life story. When he died suddenly at the age of 46, I thought I had nothing. 2 weeks ago, I found 2 pages. And it went like this. My name is Ben Broderick, Benjamin Parker Broderick. I was the son of Carl Fred Bartholomew Broderick and Kathleen Adele State. I was born in Bellefonte, Pennsylvania on October 13th, 1968. I moved to Cerritos at the age of 3. And, you know, I had 2 pages of that, inanity. And that was it. But until 2 weeks ago, I didn't even think I had anything. So 2 pages is better than nothing, right? I became so passionate that no one should ever be in my position of not having a life story of their loved one. So after Ben died, I moved up to Utah, and Elizabeth, our only child, and I were talking about this. We're like, what am I going to do for the rest of my life? I'm going to help people write their life story. That's what I'm going to do. That's my mission in my life. So that's how I am here. That's why I'm here. I started a little company, and I help people write their life story. I do firesides. I do talks. I tell people your life story. I have an uncle. He was autistic, dyslexic. His spelling in his life story is school, S-K-U-L, people, P-E-P-L. I love his life story. It matters. People's stories matter. Okay, off my soapbox. When I was in journalism, I had to memorize this. I don't have it memorized anymore. It was by Kipling. This is the first half of the first couplet of his poem from The Elephant Child. I keep 6 honest serving men. They taught me all I knew. Their names are what and why and when and how and where and who. I see some of you going along with this. This is what you need to remember when you are writing your life story. You need to tell the what, the why, the when, the how, the where, the who. I do not ever want to hear that someone who ever attended one of my classes or my firesides wrote a life story that said, my name is Benjamin Parker Broderick. I was born to and lived here. No, I want details. I'm a journalist. We want details. I was seeing the temple the other day, and a member of the temple presidency told us something that was going to be happening, and they gave us no details. And I was asking the other temple workers, I said, does it bother you that he gave us no details? And they said, no, we'll find out. I'm like, never no details. They're like, that's okay. You obviously are not a journalist. Okay, so let's go through the basic tips. You should all have your basic tips paper. Does anyone not have the basic tips? A personal history writing tips paper. Okay, good. Once you start, you'll find the stories are always coming to you. So keep a notebook or something similar handy to write them in. Do not start your personal history at this point by sitting down at the computer and starting your personal history. Start gathering stories. That's where it starts. Histories are stories. Start gathering stories and find a place to gather them in. I recommend a notebook or something similar and gather stories. They will be coming to you fast and furiously. And you don't need to write details in your little notebook. Just jot down a note or two. Such as, Northridge earthquake, standing in doorway, door hitting me in the face. That's all I need to write for me to remember the Northridge earthquake and my jumping in the doorway, because they tell you to stand in the doorway when there's an earthquake, standing in the doorway, and the door swinging back and forth and hitting me in the face. They don't tell you what to do with the door. I'm not necessarily the brightest bulb in the garden. But just write a word or two or three to help you remember the story. You know, Volkswagen bug rolling down the street, stopping it with my bare hands. That's all I need to write. And then you can fill in the details later. I'm not giving details on that one. Be willing to ask others for input about your stories. What do you remember about our family traditions about Christmas? What do you remember about that time, the times we would go to Thrifty Ice Cream and we would buy ice cream for family home evening dessert? Do you remember swimming lessons? What are your memories about our swimming lessons at the pool? Ask others for input. Ask for help, and then get those details down. Don't be too proud to ask for help for your story, because we don't have perfect memories. Well, I do, but not everybody has. Store your notes in a safe place until you can transfer them to the computer. If you shove your notes in your pocket of your suit coat or in your purse and just shove them there, you will not know where to find them, or they will get ruined when you put the bottle of water in your purse and the bottle of water spills. I am not speaking from personal experience, but one tube of lotion can ruin a whole bunch of stories. And hand sanitizer. Hand sanitizer is a bear. Put them in a safe place. Protect them. And I recommend after you have a few stories, put them in a shoebox until you transfer them to your computer. Just saying. Have a safe place. And then set a regular time when you can transfer your notes into your computer. Because if you just trust those little pieces of paper, that's not really the safest thing. So transfer them into your computer and have a regular time to do so. If I don't have a regular time to do it, time will get away from me. And so for me, at least, having that regular time is a smart idea. And then have a specified file where you store these notes. And this may sound stupid, but have a specified file where you store these notes and then label each note you add and make sure it is regularly backed up. Okay, I'm going to go through each of these points. Okay, when Ben died, I went into his computer and his notes for everything were just everywhere. He had no files. The guy was a lawyer. He had no files. Nothing was filed. It was a disaster. And my daughter learned it from him. She looks at my computer and she's like, how can you find anything, Mom? Everything is in files. Yeah, I can find everything. She looks at my photos and she's like, your photos are all filed. Yeah, I can find them. If you have a file that says life history, and then within your life history, you have the following files. Childhood stories. And even within childhood stories, if you want to break that down, and we'll talk about that later, just have files. Break it down as small as you need to, but have it organized so you can find it.
So you're talking about folders, right?
Folders. I call them files, fine. I am not a computer person, I'm a humanities person. I'm a writer. Yes. Folders. Thank you. It's been a long morning already. And make sure it's regularly backed up. Okay, I write music. I am not Janice Cat Perry. I am not going to sing for you, and my music is nowhere near hers. But I have lost so many of my songs because I have not backed up my computer. And I don't like PCs. I like Macs. I've since switched to Macs, and I haven't lost so many of my songs. But when I had PCs, they would die regularly, and I lost probably a good 30 of my songs permanently. Poof, go. Back up your files regularly. I don't care if you use Carbonite or if you use a floppy drive, and if you use a flash drive, store your flash drive in a fireproof box. Don't just put it someplace where it can get lost. Okay, back it up safely. Not all stories are going to make it into your final history. Okay, the story of the door hitting me, or my standing in front of the bookcase with the aftershock in the Northridge quake. So we have this bookcase with beautiful ornaments in front of the books, and I didn't want the ornaments to break. So I stood in front of the bookcase to protect the ornaments. It was a 4-point-something aftershock. The ornaments did not break. However, the books were not kind to my face. That story is not going to make it into my life history, but my daughter wants that story written down. Trust me, she wants that story written down. That's not, but it will be in my folder on my computer under probably adulthood stupid stories. I want to have a permanent, I don't want to have a permanent record of my stupid stories, but have a place where you can have a permanent record of all these stories, whether or not they make it into your final life history. Okay? Got it? And finally, include the good, the bad, the ugly. Be honest. Don't whitewash your stories. Those don't do anybody any good. To say life was perfect, my husband died, and the next day I was up and I was cheerful and I was just hunky-dory. I didn't have any widow's clock. I didn't do anything stupid. I never wasted any money in the aftermath. I didn't yell at anybody. My mood was perfect. It's not going to help anybody. When they're going through the same thing, and they need inspiration, and they're looking at my story for inspiration, they do not need to feel like a loser when they're reading my story. And they're thinking, well, Jonia did it. Jonia got up every morning and was perfect. No, trust me. They need to read that I struggled. And I did. Okay, basic tips continue. Don't be stingy with information. Do not say, I was born. Yeah, you were. Okay, we know that. Do not be stingy with information. But don't be too verbose. You know that situation where you go, you're talking to someone, and they say the following. So, I went to dinner, and I was talking to this woman, and, okay, there were 2 women there. Okay, there were 3 women there. And the second woman, no, it was the third woman. No, it was the second one. Anyway, this second woman there, and she was wearing purple. Well, it was more of a lavender. But anyway, this woman that was wearing this purplish lavender dress, skirt thing, it was more of a skirt. Anyway, she lived in the same town. No, it wasn't the same town. She lived in the same ward, no, the same state as my great uncle. No. She knew my great uncle. She knew my great uncle. And she had worked, yeah, she knew my great uncle. No, it was a third woman. It was a third woman. Anyway, and it wasn't lavender. It was, okay, no. I went to dinner with these 3 people, and one of them knew my great uncle. And my great uncle, she had some wonderful stories to share about my great uncle. And it was wonderful. Okay, how much more interesting is that? Do you want to pull your hair out? Did you want to pull your hair out the other way? Okay, so don't be too verbose, but don't be stingy. Yes?
Do you set a regular time to sit at the computer and convert your notes to stories?
You know what? I don't. But for some people that works. The reason it doesn't work for me is because when I start a project, I become obsessive and I don't sleep for several nights in a row. I live off peanut M&Ms and I just sit there obsessing and I keep typing. And if I were to stop in the middle of it, I would lose my train of thought. This is what I did when I worked in the journalism field. It's what I always do. And it's what I do when I do genealogy as well.
And your writing stays consistently good even though you haven't slept for 40 hours.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's a talent.
No, it's
math.
it's just the way it's always worked for me. When I am through, then I sleep and sleep and sleep and sleep. Actually, my body collapses. But, you know, it's just the way my body works. But for other people, it's good to have that discipline. So I recommend actually having the discipline. So yes, my answer to that is yes, but don't follow my example. Don't worry about creativity points. You are not writing the great American novel. Well, I hope you're not writing the great American novel. We want this to be honest. Do not worry about, what is my opening sentence going to say? My name is Ishmael. No, don't worry about creativity points. Use your own words. Write as you speak. I write as I speak. Anyone who reads my blogs, and Rob, have you read my blogs? I write as I speak, don't I? It just comes out. It just, what you are hearing right now is the way I write. Very much. So use your own words. That's what people want to hear. When they are missing you, 3 generations from now, they want to hear you. So write as you speak. Make sure you have an outline of what you want to talk about before you actually start writing. I always like to start with an objective. This is what I want to accomplish with my story. This is where I want to start. This is where I want to finish. Otherwise, I end up doing this, and I think every writer does. You just meander, and you go down some weird path, and you end up who knows where. So have an outline of what you want to talk about. Include plenty of pictures. You don't need to embed them in the text, but just make sure you include lots of pictures. People like pictures. We all like picture books, don't we? Include lots of pictures. There was that wonderful class yesterday where we saw all those wonderful pictures from Mark Bishop, where he showed us the pictures from his travels. And they're wonderful to watch. People like pictures. And when possible, and it should be possible, include a video for future generations of your testimony, of your words of wisdom. There was a family in our state, the Stones. They felt prompted. He was in our state presidency, and they felt prompted to make a video of their testimony. And they felt prompted to do this. It was around Christmas time, and it was a few months later that they were killed in a head-on collision. They were on their way to a grandchild's baptism. They had one daughter in the mission field. It was a combined family. They had 10 children altogether, and then one together. And she was on a mission in Hong Kong, and they were killed in this car accident. But they have this video of their testimony. Make a video before even you start writing your story. Make a video to have. That is so important to have. Tips for writing someone else's history. Write down facts and stories that you remember of them. In the case of Ben, his family's not going to be giving me many stories. They yelled at us up at the cemetery. They just aren't going to be giving us stories. So write down the stories that you remember. Elizabeth and I have been trying to write down the stories that he told us. You know, that's important. Write them down. Ask friends and other family members, if they are so inclined, for stories and facts that they remember of them. Pull important facts, stories, and quotes from their journals, letters, etc. Remember how I said Ben did not put anything in folders, or files as I called them, on his computer? Well, I have on his flash drives that I pulled off his computers, journal entry over here, a journal entry over here, and I'm pointing to where, when I put it in, you know, looking at his computer. A journal entry there, a journal entry there. If you have journal entries, journals or letters, pull important facts or quotes, but don't just use the whole journal as their life story. That's too much. It's just too much. You want to tell a story, not just give a journal. Follow the same format you would for your own history. Have a basic outline and stick to it. Make copies of the journals and letters for other family members to enjoy when appropriate. You don't need to copy these for the National Archives. You don't need to give these out in the newspaper, but if there are people that would like them, feel free to copy them, but don't make these the histories. And again, include lots of pictures. Include a video when possible. I have a video. So Ben argued before the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals in March, and he died in July. And so that's like, okay, we have some family videos, but the one video I have of him is of his arguing before the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. I've included that in his life story. It's what I have. Okay, I recommend going both chronological and topical. And what I mean by that is you start with birth and childhood, and you go topical within that. Okay, not topical within birth, but topical within childhood. And we'll get into more details on that in a bit, and you'll see what I mean. But I don't. And then we go to adulthood and topical within adulthood. And you'll see what I mean by that. So getting started. Rather than I said we don't need to be creative, my name is Ishmael, I have a starting page. Get rid of the trying to be super creative, and we go like this. A page that says this. Name, Junior Marie Allen Broderick. Birth date, May 29, 1901. And you won't get that out of me. Birthplace, Pasadena, California. Parents, siblings. There you have it. There's my opening page. Pretty easy. Pretty simple. There, you've started your life story. There's your getting started. Then the next thing I would do is write about my birth. And I bet none of you remember your birth. Do you? If you do, I want to know. I'm writing an article about it. Okay. But record any interesting facts or details surrounding your birth. And in my case, for example, if you go back, I was due on May 10th. Do you see when I was born? May 29th. Okay. I'm not usually late. Not that late. So on May 27th, my mom got tired of waiting. And she went and bought a piano. It was delivered on May 28th. I was the only child that was interested in music. The only child that sang, the only child that played the piano. I told my mom forever that I just waited for the piano. I had to wait for the piano. No reason for me to show up without the piano. That was an interesting fact, detail. Also, I was born in the same hospital my dad was born in. I think that's an interesting fact. You know? Childhood. So that's the next chronological time, I think. So let's talk about our family members. Start close and move outward. I.e., start with your parents and your siblings, and then go to your grandparents and aunts and uncles and cousins. So I started with my parents. Mom. I talked about all my memories of my mother. I did not say my mom was born of, here are my mom's parents. I didn't talk about my mom's history. I talked about my memories of my mom. My mom was my piano teacher. And yes, I talked about some hard things with that. Every time I sat at the piano, my mom cut my fingernails. I freak out about my mom with my fingernails. My mom was my piano teacher. My mom did this, my mom did that. Good things, bad things. I talk a lot about my memories with my mom. And then I go to my dad, my memories of my dad. My memories of each of my siblings, the games we played, the activities we did. I don't talk about Bob's 3 marriages, my sister's marriage, my sister's kids. I'm just talking childhood, my childhood memories of my siblings. And then I talk about my grandparents, one by one. And then I talk about our memories of holidays, vacations, our family traditions. Not every vacation. I don't go one by one. And when I was 3 years old, we went to Big Bear. And when I was 4, we went to Burley, Idaho. And when I was 5, we went to Burley, Idaho. When I was 6, we went to Burley, Idaho. I love Burley. When I went to Burley, we got to stop at McIntyre. I suddenly can't remember the name of the store. First time I can't remember it. Anyway, we got to buy sugar cereal in Burley, Idaho. The only time I got sugar cereal. I loved Burley. Anyway, but 7, we went to Burley, Idaho. 8, we went to Burley, Idaho. But just go through the highlights. Good things and bad things. Talk about it all. Talk about the good things in your childhood, the bad things. Where did you live? Do not say, I lived at 2741 West Central Avenue in Roland Heights, California, because you did not. No, do not say, I lived at 2741 West Central Avenue, Roland Heights, and leave it at that. No one wants to read that. How boring. I lived at 2741 Central Avenue, Roland Heights, California. It was a cute little yellow house. It had a hill on the front that I liked to roll down. Had a big tree that I wasn't allowed to climb. because my mom said I would fall out of it and break my neck. I probably would have. My parents put a sidewalk in the back because they were afraid the Watts riots would come all the way out to Roland Heights, and they wanted to keep us safe. They put a fire pit, and we had barbecues and weenie roasts, and we roasted marshmallows in the backyard. Had a wonderful garden. You know, talk about it. I loved my yellow house. Did you ever move? We didn't. We never moved, which I was grateful for. I was scarred when my parents painted the house blue. I love yellow. But if you did move, where, when, why, and talk about that and give the same details. Talk about the memories. Schools. Talk first about elementary, then junior high and high school. Who were your favorite teachers, if you had any? What were your favorite subjects, if you had any? Who were your friends, if you had any? No, I'm sure you had friends. What were your extracurricular activities? What were your memories in school, etc.? What were your health challenges as a child? If you didn't have any, you don't need to include this. You don't need to say, I didn't have any health challenges as a child. You don't need to brag. But I nearly died at 5 years old. And I was expected to be blind as a teenager. But I'm not just going to say I nearly died at 5 years old and I was supposed to be blind as a teenager. I would give more details than that. But talk about your health challenges. What were your interests and hobbies? And include details. Who, what, where, when, how, why. All of that. Clubs and organizations you belong to, your jobs, your pop culture interests. Or Rob heard this before, but my brother and I would fight every Monday night. Kiss FM in California had its regular countdown, which was, the countdown, and we would argue who was going to come in number one that week. Was it going to be Kiss or Barry Manilow? Or sometimes it was Sean Cassidy. But, was it going to be Kiss or Barry Manilow or Sean Cassidy? And I can tell you now I wasn't rooting for Kiss. But what were her pop culture interests? Who were the mentors and influential people of your childhood? Give details. Did you have pets? Pets are important in our childhood, aren't they? Or if they aren't, I'm sorry. But talk about your pets and major events of your childhood. These are things that need to go in your story. But first, write these down in your notebooks and in your computer and organize your thoughts. But these are some categories I would include. Okay, adulthood. Did you go to college? Were you in the military? Did you have job training? Why, where, what, when? Who was influential in that, in the decision or when you were there? What degrees, honors did you have? Who were your friends there? Not your friends overall in adulthood, but your friends in this situation. Memorable experiences there. What jobs did you have to get you through college or whatever? Or did you go straight from high school and get jobs? What were your jobs in this time period? What were your adventures as a young adult? Young adult adventures are fun. They were fun. I don't know about you, but my young adult adventures were fun. My best friend and I, we were into Anne of Green Gables. So we went up to Prince Edward Island, and that's where I drove into the ocean. Not on purpose. That's where we drove the wrong way on the freeway. Actually, that was in Boston. That's where we were hit by a big rig. That's where we drank, well, it was in New Hampshire that we drank the fermented apple cider. It was in California that we stood on the beach and waited for the tsunami to hit. We did fun things as young adults. We did stupid things as young adults. But being a young adult was fun. And what were your adventures as a young adult? Write those down. Careers. And I put plural because most of us don't have one career in our life. What were your careers? What, where, why, how, when, who? Who were the important people in your career? Awards and honors, highlights, lowlights. of your careers. Adulthood continued. Your marriage. Who, where, who, when, where. Your courtship story. Courtship stories are sweet. Fun and or interesting wedding stories. Do you have fun or interesting wedding stories? My friend was disowned by her family 2 days before her wedding. I became her maid of honor, and her groom was in an accident on the way to the wedding. I forgot this in the earlier session. He forgot the wedding ring. And the punch bowl had those little beads that went down, and one of the beads broke, and the red punch was squirting all over the reception hall. It was very interesting. Places lived as a wedded couple. Memorable anniversaries. Don't tell every anniversary. People don't want to hear. And we went to the Olive Garden on our 2nd anniversary. And on our 3rd anniversary, we went to just some of the memorable anniversaries. Important events in the marriage. What were the big events that happened in your marriage? And family. Names of children, birthdays, anything memorable about pregnancies, births. Family traditions you had, memorable vacations. Pets. I like pets. Important events, occasions, trials and hard times with your family. Hobbies and interests as an adult, community involvement, health issues and concerns, extended family relationships, important people in your life, and retirement, and all the things that go with retirement. And then we have religious life. And I would put your religious life in a separate category. Rather than have it try to find spots in it chronologically, I have the religious life separately because I think it's an important enough category that it needs to be separate. And it's just easier that way. But include personal spiritual experiences. They need that. Our children, our nieces, our nephews, whoever reads this, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, they need to hear these things. I really do believe that our stories are so important. So important. I can't say that enough. As we share our real stories, our real us, who we are. I mean, you can't start young enough. I mean, I told you Ben started at 30. And he didn't fail that much, but he failed at this. But he started at 30. You can't start young enough. Start writing your story. Get your kids to write their story. Get your grandkids to write their story. It's easier when you're younger. Your memory's still there. This matters. And it will matter to future generations. And I really do pray that you will feel inspired to go out and do it. Just do it. Does anyone have any questions about anything I've said? I've talked rather fast, and I know that. Yes?
I have a question that it's indirectly related to the family history, but thought maybe you'd have an opinion about it. So in my journal, so I'm an avid journal writer, but every once in a while there might be like a little rant about like your mother-in-law. Like, if she saw it, it would hurt her feelings. Is that something you need to go back and take things out?
No, do not take anything out of your journal. Journals need to be honest.
Even if it might hurt someone else's feelings?
You know what, you don't need to publish your journal.
What if they see them when I die? That's all right.
You know what, people need to be able to take your journal for what it is. You know what, I will be honest. I saw some things in Ben's journal after he died, and the places in his journal that were somewhat hurtful. Because I knew he wrote in his journal, sometimes as a catharsis. And yes, it was hard, but I also understood, and I dealt with it. I think people need to deal with us as humans. And I would say this, we had this question addressed in our previous class, and I just want to address this. When you are writing someone else's history, or you are writing and you are talking about someone else, and someone said, well, you don't want to write anything bad about somebody, I think it is fine to say, this was my experience with someone. This was my experience in dealing with them. You don't ever say, this person was an idiot. This person was horrible. But to say my dealings with them were complicated. My dealings with them were difficult. My dealings were hard. You know, my father-in-law, Carl Fred, there were people that he saved their marriage. And there were other people that found that he was hard to deal with. And I think it's fair for people to see both sides of that. Yes.
Just to add to that, my wife passed away in January, and I've just finished going through her journal. And there's some things she said about me that, okay, it's true, and I've begged her forgiveness many times.
Yes. And that's what you need to do.
Yeah.
And some of the stuff Ben said, I was like, that's just not true. And some of it I said was true. Some of it absolutely was true. And you're right.
I'm
And
glad to see it.
yeah, but you just have to accept.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I saw a hand up here.
I've just been sitting here pondering a lot as you've been talking, and you know, my husband came from a phenomenal family. I mean, good LDS stock, everything about them is good. They're just shy of perfect, his family is. And I grew up in a very abusive home, and so I've tried to always lean towards my husband's family when it comes to talking about historical things, and not bring a lot of, I mean, because my side has a lot to be embarrassed about, to be ashamed of. And so when you're sitting here and talking about writing your story and everything, I'm thinking of all the things I would want to put in, but there are all the things of my husband.
Okay.
And
Let me say this to you,
I
Bonnie.
don't want to shame them. I don't want them to think, you know, that they come from this long history of you know, molesters and...
You should never be ashamed of your history. Your family tree is not you. You need to be, because you have, okay, so one of the wonderful things that Carl Fred used to talk about was the link in the family chain that's there to purify the line. And so it's good to see the ugly behind you and how you helped purify that line. You know, you're the one that's helped clean it up by your behavior, by your changes. And so don't whitewash what was behind. Don't have to tell all the horrible details. But I would not hide what was behind you. I wouldn't. Talk to me afterward. Yes.
I just want to agree with you on that. My parents are both first generation LDS, and I know that my mom's side, alcoholism, teen pregnancies, all of that stuff, and I have to say, I never once in my life wanted to touch alcohol, not so much because of the DARE program, but more because I knew all of these people were alcoholics. This is in my family. If I touch that, that's not going to go well for me.
That's right.
And I needed to know that because I could have gone into that blind.
Right.
I needed to know all of
Thank you.
that bad stuff from my mom's history.
Thank you.
To prevent myself from going down those paths of life.
Thank you. And you know what? I was abused in many ways as a child. And I know I've looked at that and decided I wasn't going to raise my daughter that way. You know? So it's just, I would not hide it. Yes, one more and then we need to go to lunch.
I spent my summers in Santa Monica, California. I grew up in Berlin. Who did you know in Berlin?
My mom was a Jensen. So I don't know if you knew the Jensens.
I know some Jensens.
And also my daughter's mission president was the Lees. So the Lees, they have the furniture store there in town. And
Oh, I see. Wait.
Yeah, Brentley is the one that's, yeah,
Yes, it's not.
yeah. So, small world, small world. Thank you.
I'd like to thank Jonia. This has been wonderful, and I've asked Dave Toon to give a prayer.